This morning marks my second encounter with something strange, so I decided to share it. Now, I'll just say this. I have no clue what this thing is, but both times I encounter these things, it's always while I'm driving. The creature itself is a massive coal-black wolf dog thing with red eye shine. First time I saw it, I was driving home from a late class. A big old hog raced across the road, causing me to slam on the brakes. I did avoid collision, and the pig quickly disappeared into a cornfield on the right side of the road. A second later, this massive canine bounds across the road in hot pursuit and disappears after it. I've lived my whole life here, and have never seen anything like that. That was in southern Georgia. This morning, I'm driving through Winder to get to work, and I see what I first thought were railway reflectors since I was driving alongside some tracks. But as I got closer, I see this big black dog thing sitting by the right side of the road, staring in my direction. I wouldn't have gotten a good look at it if the car behind didn't have those bright lights. I slowed down since I don't know if it's going to cross the road, or just run over the tracks it was sitting beside. It just sat there, staring at us with that weird red eye shine. The thing is not small either. Sitting down, it could stare through my car's windows. Am I just being paranoid about a big black dog? Most dogs at least react to a car heading towards them at night, and this thing didn't even bother to move. Around a year ago, in May 2020, my parents were going on their annual trip to Florida with my 3 brothers for a week. My mother asked me if I could go by their house, feed the family dogs, or stay and house sit. And being the daughter I am, I told my mother I would just stay at their house to save on gas. Throughout the week at night, I would bring the 2 dogs inside to feel safer, since my parents live on a somewhat back road. Keep in mind, my parents' house is surrounded by trees, and there is a thick tree line separating their house from the 2 neighbors. Well, one night, while I was at the house alone, I called my best friend, Bailey, to come over and stay the night with me. We were going to do what 2 middle-aged 20-year-old females do when alone. Play video games, watch movies, TikToks, and drink. While Bailey and I were in the kitchen, around 3 or 4 a.m., making homemade funnel cakes, the dogs kept moving around, staring at the glass kitchen door that led off to the back porch. I asked Bailey to let them out there so they could chill. We would have enough legroom while we were cooking. While we were eating our funnel cakes, we came across a TikTok about making homemade temporary tattoos with a printed picture and perfume. Now keep in mind, my parents have about 3.82 acres of land, so there is the family house, my father's 2-door garage workshop, and a large pole barn. Those 2 buildings are farther out near the tree line, so Bailey and I walk down to the workshop to go into my parents' work office. I punch in the code to the garage door, and we go inside, straight to the computer, and print out each other a picture of Kylo Ren, to try and make into temporary tattoos for each other. Before I go any further, a little side note. My parents have security cameras all over their property, and inside the office is a television above the desk, showing all of the live footage from the cameras. So, while I was cutting out the tattoo for Bailey, she says, "What is that?" I stop cutting and look up at the cameras. At first, I didn't see anything except for a small figure in front of the pole barn. It looked like it was sniffing at the garage door. I shrugged it off, told her it was probably one of the many stray dogs that roamed around the area. Bailey nudged my arm quickly after I said that, and pointed to the screen again, wanting to prove to her that it was just a stray dog. I stood up and looked closer to the screen. When I did, I saw the figure, but it didn't look like one of the small dogs. The creature was hunched over on all fours. Its arms were super thin and long, but pointing outwards from its chest, kind of like how you'd imagine the girl from The Exorcism to be when she crawled on all fours. It had no fur, and its skin looked tight on its body. When I tell you my inner white girl went to open the door to look at it, Bailey stopped me right then, and I grabbed the lock on the door. Looking back at the screen at the creature, it looked like it scratched at the door of the pole barn. I immediately said, "What is that?" And the creature turned its head straight, right at the camera, like it was the scene from The Office. When its head turned, I couldn't make out clear facial features, but it looked like it had a human head, with two big glowing eyes. Bailey and I screamed, and it bolted. I mean, it bolted off screen. Clearly freaked out, Bailey and I hugged each other, as if that would protect us. Then, something smashed against the garage door. Not once, but twice. Like you know what it sounds like for somebody to smack a garage door from the outside with their hand. Yeah, just like that. I called my grandmother, told her that we thought we saw something, and to stay on the phone with us until we ran into the house. Once we got into the house, we brought the dogs in, locked every single door, and took shots of Crown Royal until we fell asleep. Now, we talked about this a few times, and I think it was a Wendigo, but Bailey's convinced it was a Skinwalker. We live in Georgia. I didn't think they were near here. Could anybody help us? This just happened. On Tuesday, February 16th, I was lying in bed around midnight. At the time, only my dad was home, but he was sleeping. I had been in my room for the past few hours watching a speed run, and nothing was out of the ordinary. I didn't have my headphones on at the time, so I could hear everything, and at that point, all I could sense was the video on my laptop. Well, shortly after the clock rolled over to tomorrow, this putrid, horrid, rotten, sulfuric stench filled the room. I instantly thought there was a backup in my house. I went all over the house, but as far as I could tell, the smell only came from my room, specifically by the windows overlooking the backyard. It was getting late, so I doused the room in air freshener and turned a fan on and went back to sleep. That night, Wednesday, February 17th, I'm in bed again. I should mention that when I'm in my bed, my back faces the backyard windows. Again, right around midnight, the smell returns. This time, though, there is scratching at my window. I turn to look, and the scratching stops. The smell is still there, though. I got dressed, went outside to see if an animal had somehow gotten up to my window. It isn't a second-story window, but it is still about 10 feet off the ground. There were no tracks, and the smell was even worse out there, and only existed right outside my window. I was more spooked than yesterday, but I decided it was one of my neighbor's garbage cans scraping against the chain-link fence. Then, we have last night, February 18th, Thursday. I'm in bed, and again, like clockwork, at midnight, the scratching and smells return. I'm dead tired from work, though, so this night, I don't even have the energy to look into what's causing it. So I fall asleep. While sleeping, I dream of my room. It wasn't sleep paralysis, as if I experienced that before. The smell was worse than it had ever been. I was nearly throwing up. Then, standing on my windowsill, was a creature that I had never seen before. It was like a deer, except it walked on its two hind legs. Its front two were tucked in, like how a dog acts when it wants a treat. It hopped along my windowsill. Its skin was brown and patchy. The eyes, though, were what caught my attention the most. They were like headlights. There were no pupils or anything, just beams of light. I found myself getting lost in them, as if entranced by them. I don't know how long I did, but eventually I mumbled a single word, Skinwalker, and everything disappeared and I woke up. No idea as to what is going to happen. I have a dream catcher that a professor gave me years ago. I might hang that over my bed. So, 2 things. First, the scratching returned last night, but there was no smell. I fell asleep around 11 p.m. Maybe I just wasn't awake to smell it. The scratching was what woke me up. Second, I spoke with the professor who had given me the dream catcher. He teaches a dream quest class and has contact within the Navajo community. He is at best a bit of a loss what happened, but wondered if my dreams could have melded into reality. The subject of the dreams being COVID-19, as I contracted it back in November. So, I am a bit spooked. I was driving in the woods at night with my father. I live in the middle of the forest, somewhat. We went down a long, dark road in Ontario, Canada, and suddenly saw a semi-low, tailless, earless, bony, and elongated creature that reminded me of the shape of a starving human mixed with a hairless dog. It was so fast, it was a blur, and it had long fingers and skin-colored pale flesh. The same night, we saw strange footprints outside our house. It was not recognizable as deer, moose, etc. We both have spent plenty of time in the woods, and could pretty well recognize tracks, and we never seen anything like these. It looked like a cloven hoof, mixed with a humanoid-shaped print, and was fairly spread out and large. The foot pattern was like a V shape, and followed across our yard in the snow, but suddenly stopped and left a gap of no prints, and continued again in the same line. We saw the same creature about a year ago, and we often hear deep growls that are so loud, they are as if a tree fell in the woods, and can be compared to a garbage disposal, layered with a high-pitched trumpet, with occasional clicking at our windows. My dad often sees glinting of gleaming eyes, and sudden movements of the same creature, followed by the same call. We do have native burial grounds and reserves in the city and area I live, and lots of sightings of odd, unexplainable things, including a place where thousands of natives were tortured and killed. This particular area, people report being pushed, hearing deep growls and screeches, scratching noises, weird glinting eyes, and getting disoriented by sounds, wind, movements, and even being pulled or separated with groups. People say the wind picks up and disorients, and they black out, somewhat as if they've lost time, separated from friends and waking up with it being pitch black at night. Anyone know what this is? A crawler, a skinwalker. I'm quite frightened. Thanks for any information or possible theories.